Citrus don't grow here, unless you have a greenhouse. Pomegranates really don't, we sell them. We sell miniature pomegranates, we sell regular pomegranates, but they really aren't suited for this area here. If you live down in Cottonwood or Sedona, perhaps, because we serve a huge county. Our county is ginormous, and it goes up from like 7,000 plus feet on Spruce Mountain all the way down to 3,000 foot elevation. So we serve a large area. So there's a lot of things that we may have that aren't necessarily suitable for your house, but maybe his and hers. So always ask the nursery person, and don't just necessarily assume because it's here that it's going to grow at your house. Very, very important. The actual elevation of Prescott is Mile High City, 5,200 and some feet. Out at the airport, the nursery is at 5,500. I live over the hospital, and my elevation is 5,500. So a lot of people live higher up. The more ponderosas you have, the higher you are. So you want to always, if you don't know your elevation, you might want to get that little app on your phone and find out your elevation. You can easily do it in your own yard on the apps on your cell phone now. My elevation at my house over by the hospital is 5,240 is the exact elevation. My husband wrote it down in a black felt marker on this piece of concrete for me out in the backyard. And he also put in a directional north, south, east, and west for me, and he put that on with a big black felt marker on this little compass point that he drew, like a piece of artwork in the back. So, and he goes out and refreshes it for me every couple of years. I think that's true love. Yeah, what a guy. Now, I don't like cut flowers. I don't like boxes of chocolate. So what he buys me is bags of manure. So those kinds of things I love. Or insect pinning supplies and that kind of stuff. So we have a strange and wonderful relationship. Okay, now planting a fruit tree, to actually get down to brass tacks here. Planting a fruit tree, just like planting any other tree. You want to plant them the same way, okay? You dig your hole 3 times the size of the root ball, the top of the root ball container. Measure that and then make your hole 3 times that big. So if your container is 12 inches across, you're going to dig a 3-foot diameter round hole. If your container is 2 feet across and you get a nice big tree, then of course you've got a 6-foot hole. Now you're not going to dig a cupcake shaped hole, in other words, really deep. It's going to be only as deep as a container, but 3 times as wide. So it'll be the shape of a hockey puck. Does that make sense visually? Instead of a deep hole that's as deep as it is wide, it's going to be a hockey puck shape. So only as deep as a container, but 3 times across. Okay? And also another key on digging a hole, and this would apply for any tree, is you want to scratch the side of the hole with one of those 3-pronged claw things and rough up the side of the hole so that it looks like corduroy. It's easier for the roots to grab onto it if it's not slick and shiny. If you've ever dug a hole here in Prescott, sometimes when you dig the hole, you push your shovel in, and when you're done, you practically have to have sunglasses because the reflection off the side of the hole is so slick and shiny that it's just like a piece of glass, and that's not good for the plants. Now, there's another school of thought that says, well, just dig it the same size as the root ball, and let the tree push into the soil. Well, that may work in Alabama or someplace in Ohio where they have like soil. We don't have soil in Prescott. We don't even have dirt. We have the other 4-letter word, C-R-A-P. So you got S-O-I-L, D-I-R-T, and C-R-A-P. They're all 4-letter words, but we have the third one. So it's really, really hard for the plants to push out, and they will eventually do that. But do we all have that enough time to wait for that tree to finally do that? I don't think so. So I would rather dig the bigger hole, amend the soil, get the tree off to a good start, and get it bigger, and then let it work the next 30 years trying to push out past that. Because I want to see some progress, some results now. Okay, so I would definitely say dig your hole wide, as deep as a container, and amend the soil. Like 2 parts dirt to 1 part of mulch is what you're going to do. Now, after you've dug your hole and you're looking at the native soil that's sitting out on the edges of your hole, you've got like a couple of, Kleenex box size rocks here, and you've got a bunch of hard stuff over here that you kick it, and it breaks your foot. So you're gonna actually, if you have to displace volume by getting rid of rocks, or getting rid of some of the stuff that is the CRAP I talked about that you have to just chuck, then you wanna replace that volume with topsoil, okay? So a lot of times, in the same yard, you might have a really good hole here, and you might have one that you need a jackhammer for over here. And everybody's shaking their heads. Yeah, a jackhammer is not unknown in Prescott to try to get that hole done. I myself use a pick to dig a hole sometimes, and I use this unique method that I've named the Niagara method for digging your hole. And I call it that because it uses a lot of water. I go out there and I determine the size of the diameter of the hole I'm digging, say 3 feet across. And then I take my shovel and I mark it with a stick. And then I take my shovel and I dig down as far as I can the first time, which is like an inch. And I get that out of the way, and then I start to go down the next one, and my shovel goes ding, 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 and I have to go inside and rest because my knee hurts. And so then I fill it with water and let it soak in. Then I come out and dig again, and I go pick, 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 and shovel that dirt out. And then I fill it again with water and let it soak in. And then I dig that out. Fill it again with water and let it soak in. So I call it the Niagara method because it uses a lot of water. But the advantage is that the hole is nice and moist by the time I get it done, and that dry around the surrounding soil is not going to suck water from my plants. So I have used the water, but it's helped me not have to go to the chiropractor. Water is cheaper than doctor bills, and so that's how I do it. And then in the meantime, the soil that I've been taking out is kind of moist-ish. I want to get ready to mix in the mulch if I'm going to use that soil. It's already kind of moist instead of being dry as at home. Anybody have any questions about that? And again, don't forget to scarify the edges of the hole. You don't want it to be smooth and slippery. You want it rough. Yeah?
Would the size of the hole be the same for a shrub if you're putting it in?
Yeah, the same basic rules apply. Shrub, tree, petunia. It doesn't matter what it is. Usually your petunia, of course, is going into a better dirt. Let's say perennial instead of petunia. Tree, shrub, perennial, yes, it would apply the same way. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, and then when you're putting it in, don't forget the mulch is what you're going to amend the soil with. Remember I said 2 to 1? 2 parts of dirt to 1 part of mulch. Okay, we have our water's mulch up here. And then you got it in there. One of the mistakes people make is that they plant it all, and then they stand there with a hose after they're done, and they kind of just squirt over the top, and it looks moist, and it's done. You want to water as you go. Don't fill it all up with dirt and then water. You want to put a little layer of the amended soil in and water that in. You put another layer and water that in, and then another layer and water that in. So you're doing it in stages, so that is what happens if your soil is kind of dry-ish and you're just watering the top, then it doesn't moisten this other part down here. Water sucks water. Okay, it's just that surface tension on water. So if it's already kind of moist down below, then the next time you water it, it's going to suck it down better than just kind of floating at the top. The first rain of summer, what happens to the water? Does it really soak in good and water your plants, or where does it go? Right, it runs right off. So that's the same principle we're talking about when you put your tree in. So don't fill the hole up immediately with water and then squirt it on the top. You're going to put a little bit at a time and water it in. Okay? Yes, sir, question?
How about putting a pipe perforations and bearing it down with the tree?
Yes, you can do that. I'll talk about that in just a second. Remind me again in just a minute after we get the tree all planted with the stuff it needs. Okay, now as you're doing this layering and watering in, you're going to want to use some fertilizer. You don't want to put like a 20-20-20 in on a baby tree. Even if it's a tree that's maybe 10 years old in a container, it's still a baby when it goes in the ground. I don't care if it's a 5-gallon, a 7-gallon, a 10-gallon, or a 15-gallon. It's still a baby because the roots come out the same, whether it's a 5-gallon tree or a 15-gallon tree. Those baby hairy feeder roots are very tender. And if you try to stuff a piece of steak into a 3-month-old baby's mouth, it wouldn't work, right? Same thing applies. You don't want to put regular food like that strength on a newly planted tree, regardless of the age of the tree, because it'll burn off those little hairy feeder roots. When you see a carrot in the fridge and you've left it there too long, and this is the orange part of the carrot, that's the carrier root for the hairy feeder roots. And when you pull that carrot out, what do you see on it? Little white hairy roots, right? Okay, those are the feeder roots. That's what's going to suck water and nutrients, not the orange part of the carrot. That's just the carrier for these little hairy guys. So you don't want to burn them off because they're so small. Any questions about that? Okay, and always read and follow label directions. Now, I know there's somebody out there that didn't hear me just say that. Read and follow label directions on whatever product it is you're using. That's something we learned in kindergarten, but we forget by the time we're 20. But always do that. It's very, very important so that you don't over-fertilize, you don't make too strong of a solution. A couple of years ago, I remember a man that came in and his face was white, he was horror-stricken, and he said, but I put 5 tablespoons per gallon in it. It's like, no, it's 5 teaspoons per gallon on the label. He didn't look closely enough. And so instead of putting 5 teaspoons per gallon, he was putting 15 teaspoons per gallon because he put tablespoons in instead. And he knocked every leaf off of all his rose bushes. So anyway, that's my last warning story on read and follow label directions. So we've got the tree planted. And we've got the food amendment. I'm going to talk about this one now. This is the root and grow hormone stimulator here. This is a rooting hormone stimulator. It makes the roots grow faster. Just like food and hormones are different for people, it's the same for trees. Food is not hormones when it comes to plants. Yes, sir?
Sorry, what was the first product?
That's the fertilizer. Fertilizer, it's an all-purpose organic fertilizer. It's called Water's All-Purpose. We try to make the names easy to remember. Water's All-Purpose. Okay, and it'll be probably tablespoons worth or something like that. If you have a really big tree, it might be a quarter cup or half a cup spread out. This is Root and Grow, and this is a liquid hormone-promoting root growth product. Any questions about the root and grow? Yes?
Should you mix that and then put it in layers of water?
Yeah, this is a concentrate. You mix it in a bucket of water according to label directions. And then you put it on the tree, the very last thing you do before you walk in the house and get your iced tea and your liniment or your aspirin, whatever else you do.
Is that something you only use when you're first planting it, or do you?
It depends. Yes, when you first plant, on everything you plant, whether again it's a tree, a bush, or a perennial, or a petunia even. This is to help the plant not go into shock, and it helps those roots form faster so they can suck up water and keep themselves alive better. But you can use it again afterwards, or you can use it again on plants that are not feeling well. And they're kind of sickly. You got to determine what's wrong with them first, and then you can give them a dose of this that helps put out a bunch more feeder roots. Sometimes what happens on, like, say, I set this down, it's heavy. Sometimes, say you've got a tree in the front yard and you had to put a new sidewalk or a new driveway, and you whack off like half the roots on the tree, and the tree kind of got a headache because it's suddenly lost half of its water-sipping little roots. So you can apply the root and grow on the other side of the plant, because now you've got a driveway here, and make more roots to compensate for the hair loss on the other side. Okay? Did that answer the question about the root and grow? Yes, ma'am.
Question back to the fertilizer. You said
Yes.
not to use the 20-20-20 on the new
Well,
plant.
it's too strong.
So what would you use instead?
Water's all-purpose.
744.
Oh, it's 744,
Yeah.
and it's organic. Most of your 20-20-20s, they're just petrochemical derived stuff, and they're just really harsh and really strong. The plants love this. This is like giving them a box of chocolates. They absolutely love this. They just kind of go into a little happy stupor. They love this food. Yeah, this gentleman just said he uses a lot of it. Yes, ma'am.
What's the best way to dilute that? Because
The liquid
dogs-
product?
No, the dry fertilizer, because the dogs love it.
Oh, well, diluted. I'm not sure what you mean by dilute. You mean just to dissolve it in, not dilute it. But, well, you put it on, scratch it in, and then water the heck out of the plant. Push it in, push it in, push it in. And then then you can put some dog repellent stuff around it temporarily. You know, yeah, I know they do, but dogs like to eat cow poops too, which is like really organic. And all kinds, they eat their own poop.
You can
Right.
also mix it in with your mulch and your soil so that it goes in the ground.
Right, on a newly planted tree, sure, it's been mixed in. Yeah, if you're talking about putting it on afterwards, you can't, like, it's hard to get it in there on an old tree that's been there forever. So you'll just have to scratch it in and water it in. That's all you can do. Yes, sir, in the back.
You're talking about soil amendments and things like that.
Yes.
What is your feeling on using vermicompost?
What kind of compost?
Vermicompost?
Oh, worm compost. Oh, that's okay. I was thinking something else. I couldn't hear what you said. Oh, fine. That's fine. You can use worm compost. You can use Lily's compost. It's composted horse or cow manure. I don't know exactly. Ours is in nice, neat little bags. It's easy to take home, but it just depends on how much you need and what you like. You can also use your own kitchen compost as the mulch if you want to. Sure. Yeah, in the way in the back.
What are the benefits of coffee granules?
You mean the instant coffee granules or the grounds?
Grounds.
Grounds, okay. The coffee grounds are fine to use if you want to. They help acidify the soil a little bit. Our soil is so alkaline that what the coffee grounds do, and that's what I do. I use my home coffee grounds. I just go out there and throw them out like chicken feed, broadcasting like a little fairy in the garden with the coffee grounds. It doesn't change things a whole lot because it's just not enough of them. If you owned a coffee house and you were having bags and bags and bags, it might be something I need to warn you against. But I assume you're talking about your own home, right? Yeah, it's fine. You can just put them right out there.
Are they good for killing grubs?
Good for killing what?
Grubs.
Oh, grubs.
Grubs.
I don't know. I can't answer that question. I don't know. I don't know.
Use them in our tomato plants, and it seems like it.
Well, good. Maybe it does. I don't know. There's probably a lot of benefits for coffee grounds. They just said that coffee helps restore the liver. If you're an alcoholic and you have cirrhosis of the liver, they say you drink 4 to 8 cups of coffee a day and it actually helps restore your liver. Who knew? That just came out on the news the other day. So, hey, coffee drinkers unite. This is great. It's actually good for you. Any other questions? Yes?
I'm sorry, the root and grow hormone.
Yes.
Stimulator. You
Yes.
said it was the last thing to do.
Right, the last thing you
Put it
do.
on top?
Yeah, it's a liquid. It's a liquid concentrate.
All right.
And here it's a liquid concentrate, and you mix it with water, and then you, in the amount that you want, and you pour it on. Don't pour it on undiluted. You want to mix it in water first, and then, because that's on the label, it's telling you to do that. A quart will make about 20 gallons worth of solution. And our gallon will make about, what's that? 4 times 80?
My original question.
Yes.
Mixing it with water and putting it in the whole.
You can do it as you go. You can, however, I prefer to put it on the very last thing as far as the liquid hormone goes, because the roots on your plants, they're right next to the container, and so I just put it on kind of near where the roots are on the container. I don't put it way out at the edge because there's no roots out there. I want to, not yet. So I want to stimulate the ones that are there. So I put it near where the original root ball is, and I just kind of go round and round and put the whole amount that I'm using there.
Okay, so if water is in.
Right, on the root ball and at the edge of the root ball. Yes, another question in the back.
Speaking of the roots being around the outside of the container.
Yes.
At the edge. A lot of places recommend that you actually store.
Oh yeah, you want to score the root ball, and that applies to anything, whether it's a fruit tree, or shade tree, a pine tree, a shrub, or a perennial. You always want to score the root balls, and take your little claw thing. Not only do the corduroy the sides of the hole, but you also want to loosen those roots on the root ball. If you want us to check the roots here before you buy something, we can try to do that for you. That's always helpful if you want. Lots of times it's hard to do that because they're kind of stuck in there. But we'll try if we can. Any other questions? But you do want to score the root ball. And that's the basic planting instructions, and Waters has a whole thing on basic planting instructions and staking and all that kind of stuff. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to plan, not just run out and buy a tree. So if you want to make the steps, you want to plan where you're going to put it and how you want your garden. You're going to plan it where you're going to put your fruit tree or your whatever, your shrubs or your berries or whatever. You're going to pick the varieties, then we're going to plant, and then we're going to prune. I like alliterations because that's the way my brain works. Remember all the nursery rhymes we had as kids? And that's why we remember them, and we still remember them, even though we're 95, is because, you know, they were sing-songy and they're easier to remember. So you're gonna plan, pick, plant, and prune. Okay? Yeah. Peter Piper, Peter Piper. Apples, pears, and cherries. I'm going into the varieties now. Apples, pears, and cherries bloom the latest here in Prescott. And you want a later blooming so you don't want to lose it in a frost. It could still snow a foot between now and Easter Sunday. Have any of you lived here for less than a year? Okay, how about less than 2 years? Can do. Well, about 3 years ago, it got down to -5 in the winter time. And I have seen it snow, and we've had to like shovel our driveway on Easter Sunday before, because I've been here for 20-some years. I lived up in Flagstaff for 20-some years too, so I've been in northern Arizona for a long time. And the one thing that's the same is it's never the same. Never exactly the same 2 years in a row. When we think it's spring, it's not. We have about 2 weeks of real spring. We have winter, 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 and it goes, seems to be spring, but it's not really. Seems to be spring, but it's not really. And then we have a real 2 week spring, and then boom, bam, in the summer. We don't really have one of those nice birds twittering, you know, beautiful clouds, kind of springs where you just want to sit there and with your magazine and smell the daffodils. We don't have that kind of spring. It's only 2 weeks. So when it comes, enjoy it. And then it goes right into summer. So you are careful, you have to be careful about the number of chill hours a plant has. Some of you know what the chill hours are and some of you don't. Chill hours means the number of hours that the plant requires below a certain temperature before it'll burst into bloom. If you had a 200 chill hour plant and it's gone through the chill hours of winter and it's like it was a couple of days ago, the plant thinks it's spring and it starts to bloom, and then it snows here in Prescott, and what happens to the flowers? Obviously they freeze off. If you have a 900 chill hour plant and the plant's sitting there sulking, boy, this is the longest winter I have ever seen. And then finally, it's 900 hours, it goes tick, and I can bloom now. It's now like 2.5 months later than that first one. So you want something with the longest chill hours that you can get of whatever thing it is that you're trying to plant. Okay. As far as the varieties, and it depends on how much room you have. All the peaches we sell, for example, are self-fertile. Not all the apples are. Not all the pears are. Not all the plums are. It just depends on the variety, so you gotta check. If your favorite, all-time favorite, whatever, plum, for example, is not a self-fertile plum, then you're gonna have to have 2 plums. You gotta have 2, and not 2 at the same time. That plum and the one that pollinates it, which may give you a choice of 5 or 6, so it just depends. But you need 2 plums. So if you don't have a lot of room, then you wanna concentrate on self-fertile plants. Say you have room for 1 apple and 1 cherry. Then get a self-fertile cherry and a self-fertile apple. Okay, any questions about fertility? Yes, sir.
Hour thing.
Yes, chill hours.
Okay, we've been around here for 4 or 5 years, and last year was the first time we had it spring.
Yes.
So what has the best hours? You mentioned apples were long.
Apples, pears, and cherries bloom the latest. So those are your good bets. We had a very mild winter last year. We've actually had a pretty mild winter this year. And so people who have apricot trees got apricots last year. Maybe once out of 10 years you might get apricots here. If that's your beloved what's fruit, then plant an apricot tree. Just know that you aren't going to get apricots every year and be disappointed. If your goal is fruit production for drying, freezing, canning, baking, then make sure you get something that is going to produce every year. Yes, lady in pink, just a second, sir.
Yes, we planted 2 Granny Smiths and 1 died. So then this other Granny Smith had 1 apple last summer, 1 apple.
How old were the trees in the ground?
4 years.
4 years old? Okay, they should be producing more than that.
Well, the blossoms all got knocked off except one.
Knocked off by frost or
Wind,
wind?
I'm not sure.
Wind. Well, that's another problem too. The wind isn't anything we can do anything about. Speaking of frost, since you mentioned it, let me answer this man's question and I'll come right back to you. Yes, sir.
When you said a mild winter, what do you consider mild? We had 19 degrees.
Oh, it can get to -10 here.
That's mild? Or is that because of the amount
Well,
of snow?
19 degrees is mild. 3 winters ago, it got to -5. But it can get to -10. That's the record here in Preston. So if you want to plant for durability and maybe to pass things along to your grandchildren or something, make sure you plant something that can withstand -10 and it'll produce fruit every year. Okay, but if you have your beloved whatsit, and everybody has one, my beloved whatsit and my one weakness is fuchsias, because I grew up in Southern California and they're up nearby a fuchsia nursery. So I have to have fuchsia. I mean, I can't help it. I just pass them and like, shoo. And so, well, no, it was on the coast. It was in Lucadia. Stubbs Fuchsia Nursery, yes, yeah. Yeah, it was right, by the time I left home, it was right by the freeway. It had been out in the middle of the country, but it was right by the freeway. And the family, the children did not want to take it over. They had fuchsias that were like 6 feet across, hanging basket fuchsias that had been there forever, and they were on these big steel beams that would come down. And it was a fairyland for a kid to run through. It was just lovely, but the children didn't want to take it over, and so now it's a bunch of condos, unfortunately. But anyway, yes, a question over here.
Regarding size of trees, do fruit trees all come in dwarf versus like full size, or?
Well, it depends on what part of the country you're in. Here we kind of talk about dwarf, which is true dwarf, which is really small, and then there's semi-dwarf, and then there's standard. So there's 3. Some parts of the country call semi-dwarf dwarf, so it just depends. There are true genetic dwarfs, and then there's grafted dwarfs. True genetic dwarfs, we usually sell peaches and nectarines and occasionally apples in a true genetic dwarf. If your space is really limited, there's also like columnar apples, which are upright, and you can espalier those really easy. They're really tall and skinny. They're probably 10 feet tall and only 3 feet wide. So it just depends on what you need. But true genetic dwarfs, there's not a whole lot of them. There is one true genetic cherry. We've never carried it. You probably have to order it from a specialty place if you wanted like a true genetic dwarf cherry. But I have never seen one here. Only peaches, nectarines, and apples.
Oak barrels or big barrels?
Oh yeah, you can leave it in there for its entire life in a whiskey barrel. Sure.
That's good to know too.
Yeah, they only get about 5 or 6 feet tall. That's fine if you want it to work. Yeah. Semi-dwarf, they take a standard fruit tree and they graft it to another fruit tree, but the veins don't line up. They're askew. I'll have to set this down for just a second so I can wave my hands around, so hold on. When you take a standard fruit tree and you want to make a semi-dwarf, instead of the veins lining up like this, they do this. And that makes them smaller. So that it's stunting them. So a semi-dwarf is a regular one that's stuck on a rootstock that goes like that instead of like that. Okay? Any other questions about the dwarficity? Yes, sir.
You mentioned citrus. If I want to grow a miniature or dwarf orange or what's that, the clementine,
Sure.
do I have to go down the valley to buy it?
No, we carry citrus here. Citrus will not grow outside, though, as I mentioned before. You have to be able to bring it in for the winter time. And I would not put it out in full sun here, even in the summertime. Our sun is just too bright. Let me explain about that, and I'll get back to the citrus again. The higher you go in elevation, the more sunburning the ultraviolet rays get. When I moved here from Southern California 50 years ago, I spent 10 to 15 minutes outside at NAU in Flagstaff, and I got a really severe sunburn coming from sea level to 7,000 feet. The same is true for the plants. They sunburn just as easily. So the ultraviolet rays are harsher on the plants at 5,000 feet than they are at 3,000 feet or sea level or 1,500. So you have to be careful of that. So a citrus tree that can grow out in full sun in Phoenix, its elevation is determining that the ultraviolet rays power is less. When you take that same citrus plant and you have it up here where it doesn't want to grow, you are actually like radiating it. So that's why you want to put it in some shade, or maybe morning sun only and then shade after that, because it will sunburn. They actually will sunburn. And you had another question earlier. I think I forgot what it was that we were gonna come back to unless I.
The pipe thing with the water.
Oh, the pipe thing, yeah, the watering. If you have a lawn, I recommend the pipe thing, because you can put the pipe thing in and put your drippers from your tree into the pipe thing and water them. If you don't have a lawn, I don't recommend that, because as the tree gets bigger and bigger, you have to keep moving those out. When you put your pipes in, your tree is only like 2 feet wide. And then 10 years from now, it's going to be 20 feet wide. But you have to keep moving those pipes out at the drip line, exponentially out as the tree gets bigger and bigger, and add more of them as the circumference gets larger. So, yeah, you want to water out of the drip line. So it's more work to do that. So I only recommend that really if you have a lawn, in which case it's hard to water the tree down 2 feet when you're only watering your lawn 6 inches. And lots of times people won't do that because they think, well, I'm watering the lawn, I'll just throw some extra on for the tree. And what happens is those roots start to hump up into the grass, and then they start popping up suckers because the tree's going, I'm not getting enough deep water, I gotta have more water. And it starts looking around and popping up all over the grass, and people are going, how can I stop those? And it's like a whack-a-mole. They're out there with a little hammer and they're going, bing, 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 and all those little things shooting up, but they're the ones that are causing the problem. Another question? Yes.
On the planting and the watering.
Planting, yes.
So the drip system should go on the drip line, not on the base.
Okay, the first.
Just like right at the
Right, that's okay. The first 2 years the plant is in, the only roots it has is what came in that plastic bucket, right? Okay, so your drippers are going to go there for the first 2 years because the plant hasn't shot them out yet. But you put the root stimulator on to hope to make more of those little white hairy ones. So your drippers go right by the base. But then after that, you keep moving them out and out and out and out and out. And if you have an apple tree that's going to be 30 feet tall and 30 feet across, you're eventually going to have to add multiple drippers, and split some of those off and tee them and put bigger emitters on, do whatever you want with that to make sure it gets adequate water out of the drip line. By the time the tree is 2 years old, any water you're putting at the trunk is wasted. Just think of it as money going da-ding, da-ding, da-ding down the drain, because that's what you're doing. You got to move the water out where the tree can drink it. If you were really thirsty, and I had a glass of water, and you said, oh, thank you, and I put it like this on your face, and you said, no, over here, put it by your mouth, that's where you're drinking. That's where the trees drink, the roots, that's their mouth. But if I put it, over here on the side of your face by your ear, you can't drink. Same with them. If I put it in their ear, they can't drink. Any questions? Yes?
We're going to go back to some question about freezing.
Oh yeah, well, freezing, was it the chill hours we were still talking about? Okay. Chill hours, freezing. Can't remember exactly what it was, but you want the longer number of chill hours. And as I said before, let me get back to that, apples, pears, and cherries. And then after that would come some of the peaches, and then the plums, and almonds. We sell almond trees here too. They do good. I wouldn't plant pecans up here in the Prescott area. They're better for the Verde Valley. And also there are some walnuts that perhaps would work for you too. But walnut trees grow so slow that I don't think most people have the patience for that. You're planting it for the next 2 people that live in their house. I want it now. Yes, ma'am.
So are you saying the pruning for like apples, pears, and
Apples, pears, and cherries?
is further out in the season?
No, I'm talking about the chill hours, not the pruning time. Okay, I don't want everybody to be confused with that. Hold on just a second, there's a guy in the way back.
If you move the drip system after the first 2 years, how far out?
To wherever the drip line is on your tree in your yard.
What's that?
To wherever the drip line now is on your tree in your yard. If somebody has better dirt than you, the trees may grow twice as fast. If you have really horrible dirt and it's a really windy location, it may grow slower. So you move it out to the drip line, and the drip line is where the edge of the branches are. Everything kind of makes sense. The drip line, if you were to stand under the tree in a rainstorm, and the water's running off the edge of the tree, you run up to the trunk because that's where it's dry. Okay, that's not the drip line. The drip line is out at the edge of the branches where the rainfall would naturally roll off and land on the soil. Okay? The trees are pretty smart because if we weren't there to help them, they'd still want to live, right? Okay, so if we weren't there putting the water on, the tree would have to think to itself, how am I going to get water? Let's see. I want to collect as much as possible, so I'm going to use my leaves to make it roll off, and I'm going to put my roots out there at the edge where it can suck up all the water that rolls off. Just like on a road, you see all that green stuff that grows up alongside a road, it's because the water hits the road, rolls off, and you get all this green stuff that grows because the road actually collected the water. So that canopy of the tree is kind of like the road that rolls the water off. So the tree naturally puts its feeder roots, its little water-sucking roots, out there at the edge where the rain would naturally roll off, and that's where you want it. Because if it can suck water up there, the natural rainfall, and then you're supplementing it as well, that's where you want to put it, because the tree's natural desire is to have roots out there. Yes, sir?
Reference to that, if you continue to water the tree at the base, you may wind up rotting the tree rather than...
Yes, you can actually damage a tree if it stays too. If you leave those drippers there by the trunk of the tree, you're telling the tree, I want you to have small stunted roots around your trunk. I don't care what the trunk is. I want you to have small stunted roots. And then a big wind comes along, and the tree can just go boop and fall over. We have that happen. People come in all the time about that. And it'll also have maybe shallow roots. And if it stays too wet around the trunk, the bark can actually soften, and then it'll split, and bugs can get in there. So it's a very, very bad thing not to move your drippers out. Okay, so we talked about planting, picking, planting, and pruning, and I'm going to talk about pruning in just a second. When we talked about planting, it was just you plant it as any other tree, stake as any other tree, use as starter food and the hormones. I'm just recapping for you. Now, the other thing I want to tell you about new plants, and especially fruit trees, is that vermin of all kinds love fruit trees. They love the bark. Squirrels will rake on the bark to get the sap. They take their two little teeth and go on the bark, and then they can really kill a young tree. So you want to protect the bark. You want to protect it also from a thing called sun scald. So you want to protect it from vermin and sun scald. Sun scald, especially at our elevation, is what happens in the wintertime when the sun's low in the horizon and it hits that bark kind of from the side. And especially, it's like new tender baby skin, as opposed to a wizened old prospector skin, a tree that's got a nice big bark on it that's 15 years old. So that new little baby skin can sunburn very easily. So you want to protect the bark with a tree wrap of some kind. There's things that just kind of snap on. I'm a cheapskate, so I use corrugated cardboard from an old box, and I tie it on with twine, and I just replace it as needed. Burlap will work. You can use white paint as well. You want to reapply that, so it will help. I prefer the thicker things. I like the tree wrap, or there's a snap-on ones, and I like the cardboard because it's kind of insulated and it's thicker, although you just have to watch for things trying to chew on it. Also, deer are very destructive. They're just beautiful goats. That's what they are. Skunks, well, it depends on how thirsty they are. Not usually. Skunks don't usually bother them. It's usually squirrels, chipmunks, and I was going to say beavers. We don't have any porcupines. Porcupines, yes.
How long do you leave that on?
I would leave it on for the first 2 years for sure. But then you can also, as far as not only having the wrap around it, I would protect it from the deer rubbing their heads on it because they can damage it too. I would put a screen around it made out of that field fencing that has the 2x3 holes, and get a couple of those green stakes that go in there and wrap it around there so that the deer can't lean in with his little rubbery lips and his big long tongue and get to the tree. You want to have it far enough back from the tree so that the deer can't get to it. If you make it too big, the deer may be able to jump in if it's really, really wide, but they don't like confined areas. So if the thing is less than 8 feet across, the deer won't get in there because they just don't like to feel trapped. but you want it far enough away from the trunk. Don't wrap the trunk with the wire because the things can get right to it. So buffer it out. And I would probably leave one of those things on. If you're in deer country, I'd probably leave it on for about 5 years. The fencing part, because they can destroy a tree easily. Yeah, okay, so we're talking about protecting it. And let's see here, sun scald, I mentioned that. Oh, and you want to water appropriately for the season and the size of the plant. If you've got a 5-gallon plant, we have a watering guide in the store. And I say the season as well because, you know, we tell you to water like 3 times a week or 2 or 3 times a week on a new plant. Well, if it's the middle of December or it's late September and you're planting the plant, then of course you're not going to water it that much. This is for going into the warm season that we're talking about. So if you have any questions, just ask one of the nursery people. We'll tell you how much you water and when. It's the volume stays the same, it's just the frequency that changes. In other words, if it was 15 gallons a week that you're putting on your tree that's been in for a year, you're going to maybe change it to once every 6 months or once a month or whatever it is, but your volume is going to stay the same. Okay, you don't change the volume. In other words, you don't put 5 gallons on it, you know, 3 times a week to make your 15. You want 15 all at once, but your frequency changes. Any questions about the watering? I know it can be really confusing. Yes, sir.
Twice a month.
Twice a month is what we recommend during the winter, because most of the things we're talking about now especially are non-native things. And native plants are a whole other story. You wouldn't want to water.
Then you don't water.
Right, yeah, it depends on what it is. So there's a yes but. To every question there's a yes but, or a no but. Okay, so be sure to ask us about the watering. It's too detailed to go into now. Now fall cleanup, for those of you who have older trees, you want to make sure you get all that debris up off the ground. The dead leaves, the fallen fruit, not only for vermin control, but also that's where insects harbor. And I know people say, that's nature, let the leaves fall, let things rot. And that's fine, but take it from your compost pile and put your mulch back around the tree. If you leave the fallen debris from the fruit tree and you've had any kind of insect problem, you're going to have it again because they like to hide in there. So fall cleanup, I would recommend, this is a general rule, of course, always rake up everything and get rid of it and put some other kind of compost or mulch down. Never make your mulch go up to the tree trunk. You want a gap, air gap between the mulch and the tree trunk. Use your foot. Just stick your foot there and say, okay, that's about 3 to 5 inches. So you can stick your foot and just make the mulch come up to the side of your foot and keep your foot around the trunk because you want to have an air gap in there. If your mulch goes up to the trunk, again, it can invite insects and disease because it keeps it too damp on the bark. Yes, ma'am, way in the back.
What happened last year? We had a lot of aphids, the insects, they were everywhere. Why do we have to put something on to all the aphids come back?
Okay, I couldn't hear, what did she say? Oh, aphids, okay. Well, yeah, I would, on your fruit trees, as a basic rule of thumb, if you have the fruit trees, if that's what we're talking about, I'm not sure. But if it's fruit trees, I would use dormant oil twice a year in the fall, and then also again in the spring, like about now, February, I'd use dormant oil, and I'd probably use it again first part of November, last part of October, whenever the weather's nice. That will kill a lot of insects and disease with a non-lethal kind of thing. It's just a suffocating oil, and insects, even the eggs, they take oxygen in through the skin of the insect. Spray it on the plant. You spray it on the plant. Yeah, and it falls. When you're spraying the dormant oil mixture on your tree, it drops to the ground where the insects may be too, so it covers them on the ground as well. If your tree is really big, I think we have. Well, we have some sprayers that should shoot up to 30 feet, so I don't know how big your tree is, but if it's 30 feet or less, we have sprayers that should work. Insect control on different plants is a whole other thing, so I don't want to get into that. You can ask me about that in particular after we're done with the filming. It might come up. So I'm going to pass that and go on to another one. Right, there are also beneficial insects, but we're going to skip the bugs for right now. When its first year is in the ground, the best time to fertilize is spring. That's like now. During the growing season, you can fertilize now, going into bud break. And whatever fertilizer you're using, follow the schedule of the fertilizer you're using by reading following label directions so you know what the schedule is that they're telling you. And you want to do that, and you want to stop on a fruit tree. This is kind of unusual, but on a fruit tree you want to stop fertilizing it by the end of July. Don't fertilize again after the end of July on a fruit tree. One of the reasons is because you're going to do heavy major pruning, and all you're doing then is creating more stuff to prune off. So, why do that? It's like, why have a lawn? Isn't that funny? We fertilize and feed and make it grow and chop it off, and fertilize and feed and make it grow and chop it off. It doesn't seem to make any sense to me. It's kind of like a cigarette. It's the only self-destructive thing I know of. You light it and it just utilizes itself and it's gone. You don't even have to cut it along. But anyway, you want to stop fertilizing a fruit tree by the end of July. Any questions about that? Start it now or March on a fruit tree. New trees or old trees, but your new trees, you're going to put it on as a new tree planting with the fertilizer. If it's an older tree, you can start now. And the volume, how often? Well, our fertilizer is like every 3 or 4 months, depending on, when you put it on. It's like every 3 or 4 months. In the volume, it says on the bag. Again, read and follow label directions. This one here, if it says put 2 cups per inch of trunk diameter, put 2 cups per inch of trunk diameter. Don't go, well, it's kind of expensive, so I'm just going to give it 2 tablespoons. That won't help. It's like giving you a cracker when you really want a big steak dinner and a potato and vegetable and dessert. So you give it what the plant needs for the size it is. Yes, ma'am.
Do you fertilize at the drip line?
Yeah, you fertilize out of the drip line, unless it's a new tree, which we kind of talked about before. So if it's an older tree, out of the drip line is where the water is. That's where the mouth of the tree is. The little mouth, white, hairy feeder roots are the mouth of the tree. So you fertilize out there so those little water-sipping roots can suck up the nutrients. A tree can't eat if it's dry. We can't eat if we have a dry mouth. If I gave you a box of crackers, soda crackers, and said, here's a whole box of crackers, you couldn't possibly eat them unless you had water, right? The tree's the same way. The tree can't suck up nutrients. The water is the carrier for those nutrients. And if the thing's dry, those nutrients just sit there and the tree's going, if I want that. Yes?
My yard's all stone and it's got that cloth under it. Is that going to see through?
If you have landscape fabric, which is air and water permeable, the fertilizer will go through that with the water. If you have black plastic, that's not a good thing. If you have black plastic, come see me, we have counseling. We have counseling centers for you. But you definitely want to get rid of the plastic. See me. Well, you're going to water in the same volume whatever your tree needs. So if your tree is really big and it maybe needs 40 gallons of water once every 7 days in the summertime, that 40 gallons that's going out there, right, when you water your 40 gallons that's required, that's when you put your fertilizer on and you can push it in with a little more water. That brings up another thing. Never, never, never fertilize on dry ground in Arizona. Never, never fertilize on dry ground. I don't care who tells you that. Even because what happens is the water sucks water, like I said before, and so the water will pull the fertilizer down, which is what you want. But if I have bone-dry ground on the top, or dry-ish ground on the top, and I put a layer of granular fertilizer out there, and then I put water on it, this is like a layer of lemonade concentrate, okay? And if I gave you a glass of lemonade concentrate instead of a glass of lemonade, you take a sip of that and your eyeballs will roll back in your head, right? Okay? The same with the fertilizer. What happens when the water hits it, it suddenly starts dissolving in this layer and it's super concentrated. And as you put more water on it, this super concentrated layer starts going down through the soil like this, and those little hairy roots are going, ouch, 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 because it's too strong. Okay? So you want it to be wet all through the soil. Every little hunk of dirt has a glob of water on it, and it won't release that surface tension until another drop hits it. So they're all loaded with water, all these little dots of soil. Each one, when the tree's watered, has water on it. And so when you put the fertilizer on and you push it in with water, after it's been watered, as this concentrate comes down, it hits these wet rocks and goes bing, 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 and bounces off and sucks up water off of them as they go down, so it doesn't fry the roots. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
ages of the trees, or is it on the bag, like a 2-year-old tree, 4-year-old, 20-year-old?
No, it has the size of the trunk diameter. If you have a neglected tree, you might have an 85-year-old tree that's only 2 inches wide. You might have another tree that's only 20 years old and it's like 12 inches across. So you go by the size of the trunk. Okay? Any other questions? I'm going to move on here. Okay. So we got finished by July. Okay, older trees, and I'm going to talk about pruning real quick here. Okay? Older trees. You want to, I try to do things in threes and make it alliterative so you can remember it. You want to get out dead, diseased, or damaged wood or branches on older trees. Dead, diseased, or damaged. Okay, the next three you're going to get rid of are sliders, spouts, and suckers. And I'll explain these in a second. Dead, diseased, or damaged, sliders, spouts, or suckers. Okay, obviously, to prune out dead stuff is a no-brainer. So anything that's broken and hanging off and swinging, get it off. Anything that's shriveled up and you go to bend it and it goes like a dry matchstick and doesn't bend like these are bendy, and if it goes, you keep cutting it back until you get to where it's green again. Disease, if you look at it and like there's a big old honking like cancer thing under the skin and it's on there, cut that off. Go down about 3 or 4 inches below that and cut that off. So any kind of diseased wood. If you had a living branch that's like completely split open here, that would be diseased wood. I'd cut that off. Okay, so we got dead, diseased, and damaged. All taken care of there. Now the sliders I'm talking about, those are branches that clunk together. But I had to make it start with an S, so I came up with the name slider. So I usually call them crossing branches or clunking branches. On a tree, if the wind is blowing, let's just say, I'm trying to see if I've got any that are actually going to do that. These are pretty young, it's hard to find one. Let's just pretend that this branch, and its trunk is in here, and this branch is going like this. You know, it's like up against the side. See what's crossing there? I would decide one of those two has got to go. Because if they're banging against each other like this in the wind, this is going to scar both of them. Why scar both of them? So choose one and take it off. So you don't want the sliders, the ones that rub up against each other or clunk against crossing branches. Okay. Water spouts are branches that go straight up, and they're usually a brighter color, and they're real slickery. Those won't produce fruit. So you want to cut off the sliders. The spouts that come straight up, and also suckers at the bottom. Anything coming off the base of the tree. On a young fruit tree, it will sucker some probably for the first 2 to 3 years, just because it's trying to get used to its new spot, and it may just do that because it doesn't have an adequate root system yet, and that kind of thing. So anything coming off the base of the plant, especially below the graft, and I know some of you don't know what the graft is, and I can show you when you come up afterwards, but it's that big, what they call a knee, it looks like our knobby knees there. That's the graft above the rootstock. So that knee. A lot of people look at the knee, and for those of you in the back, obviously you can't see it, so you'll have to come up and I can show you later. They don't like that knee. They go, that's ugly. I don't like the way it bumps out like that. So they want to bury it. So they plant it deep. Never do that. The trees will scream. They hate it. I can hear them. You might not be able to, but I can hear them scream. Always plant at the same soil depth that it is, or higher, and I actually recommend at least 1 inch higher because it's going to compact anyway. More trees are killed by too deep a planting and overwatering than anything else. And by overwatering, I mean frequently. They might not be getting an adequate amount, maybe the frequency is too much. So never plant it below the graft. Yes, you had a question?
On one of our cherry trees, all of a sudden, straight up, and big leaves and everything like that, but it comes off of the main trunk.
Out by the ground?
Not by the ground, but up on the branch.
That's still a sucker. Or bring in a picture of it if you want, and we'll take a look at it, but you'll probably want to take that off from what you're describing. It sounds like it. Any other questions before I go on? Yes, sir.
What about putting something on the part you cut off? Blood's getting in.
Yeah, pruning sealer. Yeah. Yes and no. There's a yes but. Here comes a yes but. Anything that's bigger than your thumb, the general rule of thumb is to go ahead and put that black sealing tar on it. I don't like the spray cans at all. They waste too much stuff and it gets all over and they clog up. I hate those things. I like the little dauber cans to daub them on. And the black hides that wound from your eye. You don't see it as a glaring wound on there. It does help. If a wound is over 24 to 48 hours old, the tree has already started to scab over itself. When a wound happens to a plant where there's no humans to take care of it, the tree just doesn't fall over dead. It takes care of itself just like we do. If we scrape ourselves, we'll start to get scab, whether there's a doctor there and we have a Band-Aid or not, right? So the tree will do the same thing. It'll start to scab over anyway, even if we the doctors aren't there to help it. So if it's over 24 hours old, I wouldn't even bother spraying it or sealing it because the tree's already started to scab over anyhow. It's that fresh, moist stuff that you have to worry about with bugs. But this time of year, there's not a lot of bugs that are going to get into it if you're pruning fruit trees now, which is what you should be doing in February. Okay, where's my little book? How far is it coming? I haven't seen it yet. Keep that thing moving. I got my eye on it. Okay. Oh, good. Thanks. Yeah, I got a couple of spies out there, so they're going to turn in whoever keeps that book. Yes, sir.
That tar, can you just use some leftover roofing tar, or does that?
Oh no, it's special. It's especially for plants because it doesn't have any petrochemical stuff in it. Yeah. It's just like some paint. If you're going to put white latex, which is what it is on the tree paint, you don't want to use anything with petrochemicals in it that would have to be thinned with paint thinner on your trees. Never. So it's always better to buy something that's specifically for plants because it has all that bad stuff out of it. Okay, so now I want to tell you, anybody can come up afterwards, you can ask me any question you want. For fruit production, I'm going to talk about fruit production. This is for people who already have an existing tree because your little baby guy, is probably not going to produce a whole lot of stuff right away. First of all, it goes into transplant shock when you transplant it. And anything you transplant, whether it's a big tree, a bush, or a perennial plant, they sleep, creep, and leap. The first year after you plant them, they're traumatized. They've been moved. Now, if there's anybody in this room who has actually moved a household full of stuff and has not been traumatized, raise your hand, because I have never known one. You have to throw stuff out, you have to unpack stuff, and it's a real nightmare. So the trees are the same. They're getting moved out of their little home, and they're getting thrust someplace else that they didn't live before. So it's like a big moving experience for them, so they're traumatized. So they're sleeping the first year, just trying to stay alive. Okay, I'm out of my pot. I gotta survive. Just like us, we gotta find the dry cleaners. We gotta find a doctor. We gotta, you know how it is, right? So the trees are the same. So the first year they sleep. And by the second year they're going, I think this is my new home. I'm beginning to feel a little more comfortable here. This is pretty. This is okay. Okay, I can really start to grow now. So the second year they creep. So they sleep, creep, and then leap. So they're creeping along and they're starting to grow more. And by the third year they go, okay, this is my new home. I now know where the dry cleaner and the doctor is, and I know where the feeders are and all this kind of stuff, and I can have fun. And so they start to grow. And then by the third year, they're really taking off. Okay? So your baby tree, when you plant it, if it's a 5-gallon tree, you'd be lucky if you got a couple of apples off of it. It will probably abort the fruit because it's so traumatized. If you get a bigger plant, something with a stronger trunk and it's an older plant, you may get 6 or 8 apples off of it. It's a bigger plant. And by the time that both plants, a 5-gallon or a 10-gallon, have been in the ground for about 8 years, they'll be the same size. Okay, so check your budget and your patience level. And your age. I didn't say that. She did. As to what you want. It always amazes me that sometimes somebody will come in and like they're on their walker, they're pushing their walker, and they pick the little 5-gallon tree and they're going to plant it. And I'm kind of nervous because I don't know that they're going to see any benefit from it. I hope they're planting it for their grandchildren. Okay, let's see here. So I talked about the different kinds of sugars. Oh, and you might want to make a note of this. Calcium deficiency in existing fruit trees can result in small substandard fruit. So can insufficient deep watering or insufficient thinning. And I'm going to talk about thinning here next. Okay? Thinning, and it's really hard to do. It's like culling something from a herd. If you guys were cattlemen, you'd know about culling. But thinning is you have to get rid of some of the fruit to have better fruit. The tree puts the same amount of sugars and waters into 6 teeny little apples as it would one big juicy apple. Okay, the same amount of volume of sugars and the food and the water goes into the one big fruit or 5 little tiny ones. Now, who would rather have 5 little tiny ones than one big one? I don't think anybody in here does. But when it comes time to finger rub off those baby apples, you have to do it after the fruit the blossoms have been colonized and the fruit starts to form. You see the little baby embryonic fruit in little clusters on there. And you're looking at it and you've waited for, 20 years to maybe have fruit on that tree, right? It's extremely hard to make yourself do the deadly thinning. The husband's out there doing it, the wife is in there crying. But, you got to get it done. So, with peaches especially, you might want to make a note of this, you really need, most people won't do it, but you really need to move 60% of the fruit, of the fertilized fruit that's forming off of a peach tree. 60%, that's a lot. Other fruit trees, it's 50%. So if you've got a cluster of 5 little things, you've got to remove 3 of those, the baby apples, off of each little cluster, so you'll have better fruit.
Is it better to leave it towards the end of the branch or closer?
I don't know. I haven't thought about that. I can't give you an answer right off the top of my head on that particular thing, but you definitely want it thinned. Not only for fruit production, better fruit, but also from the fact that the branch is bending. Now, if you've got a tree that hasn't been correctly pruned, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second because it's really hard. There's a couple of really hard things about fruit trees, and one of them is aborting the fruit, rubbing it off and getting it off there. If you don't do it, nature will do it. How many of you have gone out and seen a bunch of baby fruit lying under your tree after a windstorm? That's because Mother Nature said, you didn't do it, so I'm doing it. And so she throws some off there. But it's better if you do it, because then you can pick and choose. And so if there's one that's got a bump mark or looks like a bug nick or something, you can take that one off. If you leave it to somebody else, they're going to just do whatever they want. But definitely want to prune, thin, hard. And on fruit trees, you want to prune hard on a fruit tree. They should look like a bird can fly through there, like a robin-sized bird. I don't mean a hummingbird. A robin-sized bird can fly through the branches without hitting anything. They should be quite open. And fruit trees you see in backyards look completely different than fruit trees in orchards, right? Okay. So if you're after fruit production, real fruit production, like we're talking like farmer type feelings towards it, then you want to prune your tree very severely. If you're just after a few picking things to make some applesauce and a couple of pies, then it's not as critical for you, okay? But you'll have better fruit if you severely prune. Yes. Fruit trees here in Prescott is February. It's not the same, obviously, every part of the country, but February for Prescott. Well, but it's never too late. You want to get it done. Yes?
You said to prune peach trees 60%?
Not prune.
I mean...
Thin.
Thin, I'm sorry.
Thin fruit.
Thin, 60%. Okay, and you gave an example of how many...
Well, like it depends. Some clusters may have 2 peaches, some clusters may have 5. It just depends. Those little embryonic fruits that are still hard and green kind of look like fuzzy almonds. And then you're going to rub those off. And you just take your finger and rub them off.
So you have 5 or 6 in a cluster. You could take off 5?
Yeah, sure. Well, 6 or 2 or 3. Yeah, we'll start with 3, because that'll make you feel better. And then do the whole tree, and then go back and look at it and go, I guess I gotta get some more of those off there.
How far spaced should they be?
Well, the tree will kind of space it for you anyway. So the way the blossoms go, it's not like totally down the branch like this. There's little tufts with the leaf and blossoms and a tuft with the leaf and blossoms. So they kind of like spot themselves out anyway. So each of those little clusters may have 1 or 2 peaches on it. See what I mean? And the leaves in that cluster are what's sucking in the sunlight to make the photosynthesis, to make that fruit get bigger. And the tree's sucking up the food and the water to make the sugars to make that fruit get bigger. So you want a bigger fruit here, and a bigger fruit here, and a bigger fruit here. Space out if the tree hasn't been pruned in a long time, you've all seen trees that are leaning over and people have a thing propping them up. It's because they haven't, the things are splitting. It's because they haven't been pruned properly for a long time.
What about those are kind of like little twins? Quite a bit of that.
Where you mean they're actually stuck, they really are stuck together? Oh, yeah, that can happen. Things can grow together like that.
Yeah.
Sure, I've seen double
Are
plums.
those, should you take those off automatically or?
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
Just depends on whether you like that or not. Okay, moving on. Okay, so any questions about what you should prune out of a tree to start with? Yes.
On apple trees, they seem to have their bunches coming closer to the trunk. Do you leave, like you say, room for the robins to fly through and
Well,
prune those early?
this is your pruning happens before there's any leaves on the tree. You prune in February, there's no leaves. So you do your pruning back before it even has leaves. Okay, and that will take care of that. I'm not sure exactly what you're asking. Let me go through the list again. Dead, diseased, or damaged, the sliders, the spouts, and the suckers. In other words, the crossing branches, the ones that are shooting straight up and seem to be growing, rapidly, and the suckers coming out of the base. So those are things you're going to prune off. You're going to thin the fruit off once it's been pollinized. Pruning and thinning are 2 different things. Anybody that has a question about that being 2 different things? Okay. I think we're done. That's it. Any questions? Yes.
I guess this is more of an insect issue or whatever, but our apple tree, I think it was last year, the leaves, some of the leaves sort of curled up. What causes that?
It's probably thrips, Thrips. Thrips, there's one thrips or 25,000 thrips, but they're all thrips with an S. And they're little teeny insects that fly and crawl and jump, and they're like microscopically small, so you can hardly see them. But they're in the woods. They're on the ponderosas, they're on the juniper trees, they're on the shrub oak. They're everywhere, and so they're easily wind blown into your yard, and they love juicy things better than the wild things, just like all the creatures do. And they'll come into your yard. There's not a whole lot you can do about them, but you can spray, number 1, again, Dorn with oil. I would do that in the fall, in say September, late September, beginning of October, and also again in the spring, which would be now. If you're going to use the Dorn with oil and spray, I wouldn't bother spraying until after you've done your pruning, because why spray something you're cutting off? And it makes it easier for you to spray. So prune first and then spray your Dorn with oil. And that will suffocate and kill some of them. But they do fly, so there's not a whole lot you can do about that. We can't, unless we were in a plastic bubble and you can protect, and keep things from blowing in. But there are some sprays that you can use to kill the thrips when they're on the plant that won't hurt your fruit. A lot of the things you spray, a lot of the things you'll spray will say, don't use within 2 weeks of harvest or whatever. But if you get on an apple tree, you've got plenty of time. That's not a problem. So just ask us in the nursery. We'll show you what to spray. Yes?
Planted a Jonathan apple tree late last summer.
Jonathan apple.
This, except the trunk is taller.
Yes.
So I'm thinking, where am I pruning it? How far
Okay,
back?
if your tree is less than a couple years old, I wouldn't bother pruning it unless it has diseased, damaged, or dead wood, or the crossing branch bit where it's clunking. A film, well, take a picture of it with your cell phone and bring it in and let us know. Let's look at it, because I'm not, that's hard for me to tell from that. Yes, ma'am?
What's the best, I live in Prescott Valley, so that, I don't know if it makes a difference.
Yeah.
But I want the most successful apple tree I can get, and a plum that doesn't have a bitter skin.
Okay, she's asking for a successful apple tree in Prescott Valley and a plum without a bitter skin. If you want a plum without a bitter skin, you're talking an Italian prune plum or a Stanley prune plum. We carry those. They're self-fertile. They have a long chill hour time. I'm a big fan of those plums. They're super sweet. You can use them for fresh. You can use them for cooking. They're the classic ones that you find in the bags without the seeds in them. The dried plums, they now call them instead of prunes. But that's the Stanley or the Italian prune plum. And those are easy to grow, and they're great. I love those. We have lots of other types of plums as well, but they all have the skin is sour. I don't really call it bitter, it's more sour. Another question?
The apples, domestic apples.
Oh, the apples. Oh, there's lots of choices for apples. So we can do Fuji's good. Yeah, Gala's good. Fuji's self-fertile. I don't think Gala is. So it depends on how many trees you want. But come up and talk to me afterwards. Another question in the back there? Any other questions? Yes? Topping. Well, it's you're talking about an old tree or a little tree? New tree. Well, I usually don't. Oh yeah. The first couple of years the tree's in the ground, as I say, it sleeps, creeps, and leaps until it's ready to leap. I don't like to whack on it too much because sure enough, the part that I cut off, a deer comes along and eats the part that I had left. Or the kid throws a basketball and it breaks off the branch that I had left because the tree's still young. So I personally don't like to start really pruning it much, other than disease damage or dead wood or the crossing branches and all that kind of stuff, until it's 3 years old. So I can know for sure what part of it's actually going to live. Well, if this tree was 3 years old in the ground in your yard, and I was going to cut it to keep it shorter, I would cut this off right here. Yep.
And these full-size trees like this, they can keep them down to a decent size?
Yeah, probably about half size. If you start pruning it, by the time it's 3 years old, and keep pruning it, you can keep it short, much shorter. Yes. Yes, ma'am. Behind you.
I have a peach tree that got some damage. In fact, I had 2 of them. I don't know what they call them, but they're like a donut peach. It's round and narrow. Have you ever heard of those?
Is that what it's supposed to be like, or is that the damage?
No, I'm just saying that's kind of fruit.
It's called it's called a donut peach. I don't know. I've never heard of it.
I've seen them at the grocery store called donut peach.
They're delicious.
Yes, they are.
Okay. I don't know about that variety. I'd have to try to cross-check and see what flavor name it is.
Both of them got damaged, and one of them died, so he's no more. But the other one, the main stalk got damaged, but I got a bunch of stuff coming out. I don't know if they're runners. I don't know if it's going to produce fruit.
Is it coming out from the ground or from the main trunk?
I think it's coming out from the ground.
Okay.
I was going to take a picture. It was
if it's coming out from the ground, it's coming out below the graft, and that's not going to be what you think it is. If it's a certain variety of peach that doesn't happen to like Prescott, and I've never heard of it in the 20 years I've been here, it's probably a variety of peach that doesn't really like it here, which is probably why it's not thriving.
They have a lot of them in the Central Valley of California.
They were doing really good. The horses got hold of them and ate most of the bark off of them. That's the problem.
Okay. Well, then it sounds like they're goners.
Called and not impressed.
If I knew what its real name was, I could help you better. But there's some peaches like a Babcock peach, for example. A Babcock is a white peach, and a lot of people love those peaches, especially people coming from California. But they have a very low chill hour. They have like a 200 chill hour, which means they're going to bloom early, which means you probably won't get peaches as often as you want. So if you've got a peach tree in your yard and you really like peaches, I would get something else like a Reliance or a Ranger orange peach, which is going to have 900 or 1,000 chill hours, and then you'll get peaches every year.
That was my other question. How do you know how many hours it has? I've never noticed that on the little tag it says 900.
It doesn't say on the tag. That's why we have reference books, and we know.
Oh, I just think
nursery people know, and we have reference books too. I have a book up here, and I can show you if I knew the variety of the peach you were asking about, I could actually look it up for you right now. But I know from experience that Reliance is 1,000 and Ranger is 900, and then Rio Oso is like 800. So if you want peach flavor, and you don't have to have the white, then I would get one of those peaches that we know like it here in Prescott.
I've never seen that peach before.
No.
And some like Sam's Club, Costco, Safeway, they're round, but they're not, they're like a donut. They look like a donut.
Right, but that, yeah, but.
They're so good.
They're like
Because
a
they don't
theater
roll
too.
off the table.
Yeah, me too.
Well, peaches to me are, both my grandparents had extensive fruit trees, one in Escondido, California, and the other grandparent lived in Norco, and they had fruit orchards of all kinds. We used to play in there all the time as I was a little kid. We'd run under the fig trees and just pull down figs by the handful, and every kind of plum you could imagine, and the same with my grandpa, avocados, citrus. Oh yeah, he had plums. He had 4 kinds of plum trees. Yeah, but in all that time, I've never seen that kind of peach. Maybe it's a new one. I don't know. Has it been around for a long time?
I don't know.
Could be something new, like a pluot is fairly new. Oh, it's from Japan, he says. Yeah. She says she's only seen that kind of peach in the last 10 years, and it's in California, in Central Valley. And Central Valley, California is nothing like Prescott, Arizona. So I would say there's a couple of reasons for that. The horses damaged them, but maybe the tree was actually glad to be out of its misery, and it would prefer to be a different kind of
They were
peach.
doing really well on the farm, they were doing well on the ground. So.
Stark, it says a Saturn peach.
That's it.
Does it say, can you find out how many chill hours is on that? Oh, okay, we have a techo person here that's gonna check and see how many chill hours is on the Stark peach. See if you can find that for me. Yes, sir.
I've noticed that a number of the plants out here have the chill hours on the tag.
Sometimes they will, sometimes they don't. So,
That's one thing they should start introducing.
yeah, it would be nice if every tree had on it, but you can't bend the growers to your will all the time.
And somebody should plant it.
Right, yeah, and sometimes they stick the wrong. You have a lot of people that don't read English putting things on the trees, and sometimes things get messed up. Yeah, so.
That's all I got to do.
Right, yeah. So always ask us because you get an apricot tree instead of a peach tree because somebody couldn't tell what the difference was. Wayne, hang on just a second. Way in the back, Lady has a question.
Yes, we bought a house in Chino Valley about a year ago. It had lots of fruit trees and there were a lot of blossoms, but nothing, no fruit produced none. I mean, as we know, there's apples, cherries, and pears, that makes some plums, but no fruit anywhere.
If you have a major thrip problem, THRIPS, thrips problem, which this man was asking about over here, thrips will suck all the moisture out of the flowers, and that embryonic center that the bee lands on and pollinates, that little teeny center, if it's too dry, it will never form fruit. So if you have a lot of thrip problem, that would cause it. So you'd want to make sure you spray for thrips, and I would start with Dormadoil now. Yeah, but prune them first. And if you can't make yourself do it, the major pruning, like flying through the tree, like I was talking about a robin flying through there, if you can't make yourself do it, do whatever you can do, and then spray the trees right away. Okay? Yes, you have another question.
This Chinese apricot says it's early bearing. Does it require chill out?
Well, early bearing does not necessarily mean short chill hours. It can, but not necessarily. There's early bearing apples that have a large number of chill hours. Depends on when the fruit's forming. That's what that means, the bearing part of it. And also the age of the tree that's going to bear sooner. But I'm not, my personal opinion on apricots here is that they're not fruit fit. You spend a lot of money and time on fertilizer and water to get fruit every 10 years.